Objection.
I yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you yielding. And Mr. Blumenauer, thank you for leading on this. Ms. Gabbard and Mr. Stivers as well. This is such an important issue. You know, we're a nation of commitments, and you know, a lot of the times Washington gets this reputation of, you know, Republicans and Democrats don't agree on anything and we just fight like cats and dogs. And I feel like some of that's true, but I think this is a great example of where, frankly, people are coming together to say as a nation, what's the right thing to do here? We've made commitments, we've taken ourselves and made promises to people, and people have put themselves out on the line for us. What's the right thing to do? I would even dare to speculate that those of us that are sponsoring this amendment probably don't even agree on the future of the Iraq War or the Afghanistan War. But we do know that we believe we have to hold to this. As Ms. Gabbard was talking about, there's a lot of unsung heroes in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I experienced it as well as a pilot in the military, as people that were Iraqi nationals, in my case, that really stood up and put their lives on the line in order to fight for a new Iraq, to fight for a new freedom, to provide for their families, and to understand that they want to build an alliance between Iraq and the United States. And a lot of them went home at night, as was eloquently expressed, went home at night in fear that this was going to cost them their lives. But knowing that the strength and the power of the United States was there with them, and that they could rest easy at night knowing that we would keep to our words. Unfortunately, many of these folks have been killed or targeted for killing and do continue to live in fear. And so we created a program which would allow a lot of these that have put their lives on the line in order to facilitate what our interest is in Afghanistan and Iraq to be able to come and come to the United States. And unfortunately, this has been bogged down in bureaucracy that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's been bogged down in the definition of whether they worked for the United States or whether they actually worked for ISAF. Well, I would tend to say that whether you worked for ISAF or the United States, you should probably fall under this program. And I think it's just right that we as a nation figure out what's going wrong and do this. And I think this is a great opportunity. This is a great opportunity to come together and say, you know, you put your life on the line for us, we're going to do everything we can for you. You know, I think about all the times when I would be ready to go fly, and, you know, you talk to folks that are associated with what we're doing, and had we not had interpreters there to be able to bring the languages, frankly, of the United States and Iraq or Afghanistan together, we'd often just be staring at each other, not knowing what we're thinking, but we're each thinking something. But to be able to have these folks that come together and really talk about what it is that we need to do is the right thing to do. I just, again, want to say that, you know, as Americans, we have to hold to our commitments. This program provides life-saving protection to those that served us. It's providing countless, it will provide refuge to the countless Iraqis and Afghan civilians that have helped us, and it's the right thing to do. So, again, I just want to say to Mr. Blumenauer, to Ms. Gabbard, to Mr. Stivers, and to everybody watching, frankly, and listening to these proceedings, thank you for your help. Thank you to America for standing up and doing the right thing, and to those that continue to defend us day by day. Right. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to yield back the balance of the time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment from the gentleman from Oregon. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair is the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Gentleman from Oregon.
On that, I would like a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oregon will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 137, printed in Part B of House Report 113-108. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, my amendment would strengthen a prohibition unanimously.
Does the gentlewoman offer an amendment?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I have an amendment at the desk.
Will designate.
Amendment number 137, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-108, offered by Ms. DeLauro of Connecticut.
Pursuant to House Resolution 260, the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Ms. DeLauro, and her member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Connecticut.
Mr. Speaker, my amendment would strengthen a prohibition unanimously supported last year to stop the Defense Department from purchasing equipment from the Russian arms dealer Rosoboronexport As we have debated this bill, estimates of the death toll in Syria hit 93,000, and the administration confirmed use of chemical weapons by the Assad regime. Yet, remarkably, U.S. taxpayers continue to provide subsidies to Russia's arms dealer through no-bid Pentagon purchases of Mi-17 helicopters, even as the firm continues to serve as the top supplier of the weapons the Syrian regime is using to fuel the tragic war. In fact, the Russian arms dealer recently took an order from the Syrian army for a wide range of weaponry, and the possibility remains that Russia may provide Syria with S-300 air defense systems. It is unacceptable that at the same time the Pentagon is purchasing Mi-17 helicopters for the Afghan security forces from Rosoboronexport through no-bid contracts that do not allow U.S. companies to compete. Last year, the Army purchased 31 Mi-17s from the Russian arms dealer. The President then signed into law last year's defense bill banning the Pentagon from using 2013 funds to enter into a contract with the Russian arms dealer. Yet, in a clear violation of the spirit of the law, DoD announced in April it would use 2012 Afghanistan Security Forces funds to purchase 30 more Mi-17s, a contract signing that is imminent. Meanwhile, the Defense Contract Audit Agency, or DCAA, attempted an audit of Rosoboronexport's pricing of Mi-17 helicopters, which the firm refused to cooperate with. This is outrageous. My bipartisan amendment prohibits the Pentagon from purchasing equipment from the Russian arms maker unless the Secretary certifies the firm is cooperating with DCAA, not delivering S-300 missile defense batteries to Syria, and has not signed new contracts with Syria since the beginning of the year. The amendment also requires that any new contract for helicopters for the Afghans be competitively bid. The Defense Department should not engage in contracts with companies arming the Syrian regime. This can and must stop. Furthermore, if we are going to spend U.S. taxpayers' dollars to provide helicopters to the Afghan National Security Forces, we should spend those dollars for the purchase of U.S.-made helicopters. I urge support for my amendment and reserve the balance of my time.
Lady reserve. First, the gentleman from California rise.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim the time in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized.
But I will not oppose the amendment.
Without objection.
I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Connecticut is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, can you tell me how much time remains?
You have 2¼ minutes.
I yield the balance of the time to my colleague from Virginia who has worked on this issue with me, and Mr. Moran.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2¼ minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank my very good friend from Connecticut and the chairman of the committee, because I trust that he will support this as well. This amendment passed overwhelmingly last year, bipartisan vote. The problem is that the Defense Department ignored it. They went ahead continuing to buy weapons from Rosoboronexport, the very same Russian arms supplier that is enabling President Assad to kill more than 90,000 of his own people, who is now, we can have confirmed, using chemical weapons against his people. 1.6 million Syrian refugees are scattered across 5 countries, and within the year, half of the Syrian population is going to be in need of aid. So this has to be fixed. This is not a sustainable situation. And the Obama administration says, well, we are going to have to get more aggressively involved, supplying more military assistance to the insurgents. But think about this. The problem is that Assad is getting all the weapons he wants. In fact, he's asked this Russian arms exporter, Rosoboronexport, for advanced S-300 missile defense batteries, 20,000 Kalashnikov assault rifles, 20 million rounds of ammunition, machine guns, grenade launchers, grenade sniper rifles with night vision sights, Mi-17 helicopters. are also made by Rosoboronexport, and we're buying helicopters from them. Can't we coordinate the right hand with the left hand? We should not be basically subsidizing Rosoboronexport, who is the problem, a large part of the problem in Syria. Some have suggested that without Russia's aid, President Assad cannot continue killing his own people. Now, I don't know that we can ever convince President Putin, to stop this. It's obviously a state-owned arms supplier, but sure, the Congress can say, no, don't purchase from the same person that is supplying the Syrian
time has
regime.
expired.
Thank you, Mr.
The
Chair.
gentlewoman from Connecticut's time has expired as well. Those in question on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Connecticut, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. This amendment is
on that, I
Connecticut.
ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Connecticut will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings on the House will now resume on those amendments printed in Part B of House Report 113-108, on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 21 by Mr. Turner of Ohio. Amendment 22 by Mr. Holt of New Jersey. Amendment 25 by Ms. McCollum of Minnesota. Amendment number 32 by Mr. Nolan of Minnesota. Amendment number 33 by Mr. Larson of Washington. Amendment number 36 by Mr. Gibson of New York. Amendment number 37 by Mr. Kaufman of Colorado. Amendment number 19 by Ms. Rulewski from Indiana. Amendment number 20 from Mr. Smith of Washington. Amendment number 14 by Mr. Polis from Colorado. Amendment number 23 by Mr. Polis from Colorado. Amendment 39 by Mr. Von Hollen from Maryland. Amendment number 123 by Mr. Blumenauer of Oregon. And amendment number 137 by Ms. Delario of Connecticut. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes the time for any electronic vote after the first series in this vote. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 21, printed in Part B of House Report 113-108 by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Turner, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed in the voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 21, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-108, offered by Mr. Turner of Ohio.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
A third and likely final day of debate in the U.S. House on the annual defense authorization bill, the bill that authorizes Pentagon spending and sets Pentagon policies and programs. A series of a dozen or more amendment votes first before they get to final passage on the House floor. This one's by Republican Michael Turner of Ohio, which would require the President to convey to Congress the details of any proposed deals with the Russian Federation concerning missile defense or nuclear arms of the U.S. It's a 15-minute vote. The following votes will all be 2-minute votes. On another defense-related issue and at the White House today, the briefing at 12:30 today will also feature the Deputy National Security Advisor, Ben Rhodes. So it's likely that he will get asked some questions about the use of chemical weapons by the Syrian armed forces. He'll be speaking at the briefing at the White House, talking about the upcoming G8 summit, and that will be live, by the way, on our companion network, C-SPAN 2. But here on C-SPAN, coverage of the amendment votes in the U.S. House. This first one, 15 minutes, and coming up, they'll vote on an amendment by Adam Smith of Washington, which would provide a framework to close the detention center in Guantanamo Bay As this vote continues, we're going to show you the House floor debate from just a bit earlier today.
Thank you. This is a very straightforward amendment that simply asks the President to put together a plan to close Guantanamo Bay. One of the complaints in recent weeks is we've seen Guantanamo become more and more untenable. It continues to be an international eyesore. Way back in 2007, President George W. Bush said it should be closed. Then candidate John McCain said it should be closed. As recently as last week, Senator McCain and some other senators went down and reached that conclusion as well. I think a justifiable criticism of that has come from the other side of the aisle that said, well, you can't close it unless you've got a plan for what to do with the inmates and a plan for how to close it. And that is exactly what this amendment does. It requires the President within 60 days to come up with a plan for closing Guantanamo Bay Prison, and then it also removes all of the restrictions that are in this bill that would stop him from generating that plan. And the bottom line is we do not need Guantanamo. Guantanamo was set up in the first place in the hopes that because it wasn't actually on American soil, we could somehow hold people outside the normal bounds of due process in the Constitution. But the court ruled otherwise. The court ruled that habeas does apply because Guantanamo is effectively under control of the United States. So there's no benefit there. There's no greater rights in the U.S. than there are in Guantanamo. We just continue to have this prison that has been set up in a way that the international community cannot stand. And it makes a problem for us in terms of being able to cooperate with our allies and to have our ability to get that cooperation to properly prosecute the war on terror. So I am simply asking that we put a plan in place so that we can close Guantanamo Bay once and for all, something that Republicans and Democrats alike have said that they wanted to do. We simply haven't taken the steps necessary. The prison is becoming very, very expensive. There's $250 million in MILCON contained in this bill just to keep it at a somewhat temporary status. And beyond that, the prospect of the United States simply warehousing 166 people forever with no end in sight is contrary, again, I think, to our values and to our process. And I really want to emphasize the fact that we have here in the United States well over 300 terrorists incarcerated. There is a notion that somehow we couldn't possibly accommodate them here because of the threat. But we have Ramzi Youssef, we have the Blind Sheikh, we have some of the most notorious terrorists in the world housed here already, safely and securely. That is simply not an argument against doing this. The temporary facilities down at Guantanamo are not sustainable. Now, I'm not going to rush this and say we got to close it tomorrow if we don't have a plan. I'm simply requiring the President to come up with that plan and then giving him the legislative freedom to develop that plan. Because what we've done in this bill far too often is restricted that. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Washington reserves the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim opposition to the gentleman's amendment.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 10 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to my friend and colleague, the chairman of the Sea Power Subcommittee on the Armed Services Committee, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Forbes.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, on May 28, 2010, I stood on this floor and made a motion that effectively stopped some of the worst terrorists in the world in Guantanamo Bay from being transferred to the soil in the United States. At that particular point in time, the then chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Democrat Ike Skelton, stood on the floor and said this: "We're in a position to accept this motion. I just wish to point out that there's no difference between the Democrats and Republicans when it comes to fighting terrorism." Today, we step on a course with this amendment to change that, as the highest-ranking Democrat on the Armed Services Committee seeks to overturn essentially that motion. And, Mr. Chairman, if the gentleman was asking that these terrorists be brought to his district, that would be one thing, but he knows that's very unlikely. And what you're having with this motion is very generously saying they could be brought to any of our districts. And we're hearing a uniform chorus stand up from North Carolina, Virginia, Guam, every other place saying, don't bring them to my district. And the reason is they know two things. They know the moment they touch U.S. soil, they will receive additional constitutional rights that no one in this room can argue what they are exactly. And secondly, that they have placed a target on every elementary school, every shopping mall, every small business in that district by other terrorists. That's why, Mr. Chairman, it's important that we come together, unified, and send a message to the President. We might not be able to stop every terrorist from coming to U.S. soil, but we can stop these terrorists by defeating this amendment. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman from Virginia yields back. The gentleman from California reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the Smith-Moran-Nadler amendment, which provides a six-part plan for closing Gitmo. The amendment will remove the existing limitations on transfers, strike the current request for construction at Gitmo, and end funding for the facility on December 31st, 2014. The time to close Guantanamo is now. It is a stain on our national honor. We are holding 166 people at Gitmo, 86 of whom have been cleared for release. That is to say, they have been found guilty of nothing and judged not to pose any danger. There is no reason and no right for us to hold them further. Now, Mr. Speaker, I wonder which of our colleagues doesn't believe in the American system of justice. I wonder which one of us does not trust our own American courts. I wonder who among us does not believe in the Bill of Rights. Who does not believe in the right to counsel or that people should be presumed innocent until proven guilty? And what we have in Gitmo is a system that is an affront to those beliefs and to America. In the last decade, we have begun to let go of our freedoms bit by bit with each new executive order, each new court decision, and yes, each new act of Congress. We have begun giving away our rights to privacy, our right to our day in court when the government harms us, and with this legislation, we are continuing down the path of destroying the right to be free from imprisonment without due process of law. I want to commend the gentleman from Washington and the gentleman from Virginia for fighting to close the detention facility at Guantanamo. The language in this bill without our amendment prohibits moving any detainees into the United States and guarantees that we will continue holding people indefinitely, people who are not necessarily terrorists, who we only suspect to be terrorists, who have not had a day in court to prove that they are or are not terrorists. We will continue holding them indefinitely without charge, contrary to every tradition this country stands for, contrary to due process and civil rights. Because of this momentous challenge to the founding principles of the United States, that no person may be deprived of liberty without due process of law, and certainly not indefinitely without due process of law, we must close the detention facility at Gitmo now in order to restore our national honor. They will have no additional constitutional rights. The Supreme Court ruled that they have the same constitutional rights in Guantanamo as they do here. We must close this facility, restore our national honor, support this amendment. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to my friend and colleague, the gentleman from Ohio, Dr. Wenstrup.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, the Guantanamo Bay detention facility was established to hold unlawful enemy combatants captured during the War on Terror. And any proposal to close the Guantanamo detention facility must first clearly address the transfer of remaining prisoners detained there. Many of the remaining detainees are the most hardened terrorists, including those responsible for the 9/11 mass murders of many Americans. There are three primary options: transfer to another country, or transfer to the United States, or stay put. Transferring these terrorists to another country comes with a substantial risk of re-engaging as an American threat. The current re-engagement rate of former Guantanamo detainees is nearly 28%. I served for 1 year in Iraq with the Army as a medical officer at one of the largest detention facilities there. Often, after prison release deals made by entrusted decision makers, we saw the same people return for new offenses. Additionally, there were multiple escapes and attempted escapes, as well as attacks trying to free the detainees. I've been to Guantanamo, and the facility there offers a safe and secure location away from our soldiers on the battlefield. I don't think there are many people in Cuba that are trying to free the people that are held at Guantanamo, and this was not the case in Iraq, and it may not be the case should they be transferred to the United States. I believe the prisoners at Guantanamo Bay are being treated appropriately in a way that we can be proud of as a nation. The hunger strike policy is carried out humanely, with the detainees treated as patients. The access to caregivers and medical facilities is the same for our troops as it is for those detained. Additionally, transfer to the United States would be very expensive. We've already built a courtroom there that cost us in the millions of dollars. These terrorist detainees pose a very real danger to our security in America. They mean us real harm. The President has the ability to certify transfers of detainees to other countries, but he has yet to do so. And until the President leads with a better solution, I firmly believe that keeping Guantanamo open is our best option, our safest option, and our most logical option. With that, I yield
Gentleman's
back.
time has expired. The gentleman from California reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank my friend for yielding. First, let me say I think we all agree that our service members who served us at Guantanamo have done a tremendous job and have brought great honor to our country. We thank and respect all of them. I also believe that there's unanimity here that if someone is a credible threat to the United States, they should be detained, tried, and brought to justice. The question is where to do that. Why should it be Guantanamo? Do defendants have greater rights if they are transferred from Guantanamo to a place in the United States? The Supreme Court has said, no, they don't. So there's no tactical advantage in a trial. Are they more likely to escape if they're transferred to the United States? The history says no. The number of escapes from maximum prisons, the supermax prisons in the United States has been 0. Is it less expensive to hold them at Guantanamo? Most is certainly not. The average cost of incarcerating someone in a federal maximum security supermax prison is $34,000 a year. The cost to the taxpayer of incarcerating someone at Guantanamo is over $1.6 million a year. Is there some strategic advantage globally to holding these detainees at Guantanamo? The opposite is true. General Petraeus, Admiral Mullen, other leaders of our intelligence and military forces have said that Guantanamo is the best recruiting device against the United States around the world for those who are trying to sell the lie that the United States is an inhumane and unjust place. There is simply no rationale for an indefinite extension of the problem at Guantanamo. For reasons of security, for reasons of law, for reasons of cost, for reasons of strategic advantage, we should close Guantanamo Bay. That's why I support the Smith Amendment.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 1 minute to my friend and colleague, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Cott.
Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 1 minute.
I oppose this amendment. I oppose the closure of Guantanamo and the transfer of detainees to the United States. Guantanamo is a state-of-the-art detention facility in which we've invested millions of dollars, in which our troops handle themselves with utmost professionalism. The detainees there have access to military tribunals and habeas corpus proceedings here in Washington, D.C. Who are these detainees? They're not innocent goat herders swept up by marauding United States military, of which I was a part, in which I detained numerous potential terrorists. They are people like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, Mohammed al-Qahtani, one of the would-be participants in 9/11, terrorists who are closely associated with Osama bin Laden, who have received explosives trainings, who are recruiters, who are poison experts, who are suicide bombers, or who are commanders of al-Qaeda training camps. I do not think we should bring them to the United States, give them their Miranda warnings, give them attorney at taxpayer-provided expense, and if acquitted and not accepted by their home countries, be released back onto the streets of the United States. If that is what the advocates of this amendment would like, I suggest they should write their amendment in a fashion that would bring these detainees to their own congressional districts.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Moran.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you know, you can pretty much win any battle you want to fight with superior military might. But for wars of consequence, you have to be fighting from the high ground consistently. And that's what this amendment is all about. We will win this war against violent extremism, but in order to do so, we have to win over the hearts and the minds of hundreds of millions of Muslims around the world who want what we have. They want equal justice under the law. They want fairness and truth and transparency and democracy. The vast majority are young, idealistic, very impressionable, and unfortunately too many of them are misled and manipulated. We have a superior set of values and principles. It's what defines us as a nation. But we have to hold steadfast to those values and principles. We have to show that even when we are challenged, even when it's politically difficult, we believe in equal justice under the law. We believe that people are innocent until proven guilty. We believe that every life matters. We believe in human rights. We don't believe in torture. But we do believe in our justice system. It's not our justice system that's operational at Guantanamo. It was set up there to be outside our justice system so that we could detain people indefinitely. Can I have another 30 seconds?
Yield the gentleman an additional 30 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for additional 30 seconds.
And at this time in our history, when we're furloughing 650,000 Department of Defense employees, how can we justify spending $1.5 million per detainee at Guantanamo when half of them have been cleared for release? Doesn't make sense. And now in this bill, we're authorizing another $250 million to be spent at Guantanamo. Those are misguided priorities. It costs $34,000 to jail very dangerous terrorists in this country. But in this country, we can convict them. We can punish
Gentleman's
them.
time has expired.
That's what we ought to be doing.
Gentleman
Thank
from
you, Mr.
Washington
Chairman.
reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield at this time 1 minute to my friend and colleague, the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Pompeo.
Gentleman from Kansas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few facts I think are appropriate to bring to this debate. I oppose this amendment vigorously. Just 2 weeks ago, I was down at Guantanamo Bay as a trip as part of the House Select Committee on Intelligence. I will tell you that the soldiers and Marines and airmen of Joint Task Force Gitmo are taking tremendous care of our facility, our assets, and the detainees. Those who suggest that this facility should go away will create a problem that is worse than the one that we have today. This amendment is simply a pattern of appeasement that does not comport with the fact that radical Islamic terrorists will not cease to attack us simply because we wish that they will go away. So a few more facts. We close Guantanamo Bay. We try to release them to countries that will accept them, and we know that at least a quarter of them will return to the battlefield. We could bring them back to the United States and they go to civilian courts, and undoubtedly some of them will end up walking the streets of the United States. And perhaps the final fact, and one that I've heard said in support of this amendment, is if we simply close this facility, that recruiting for radical extremists will diminish. This seems illogical. There is no support for such a statement. They will continue to attack us whether we keep this open or closed. This facility is legal, it is just, and it is an important national asset.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized and has 30 seconds remaining.
I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman is recognized for 30 seconds.
A whole bunch of false arguments are being laid out here. As has been clear, no greater constitutional rights come to people in the U.S. than in Guantanamo. So that is just a phony argument. Second phony argument is that somehow they can't be held safely. I have a federal prison in my district. I have an INS detention facility in my district. And frankly, if there was a Supermax facility in my district, I would not have a problem with them coming to that district. They should be held. I would hope that all of our Supermax facilities, which are holding very, very dangerous people, they'd better be holding them securely right now. It's $1.5 million a year versus $34,000. It is an absolute recruitment tool for al-Qaeda. Our military leaders, General Petraeus, have all said that this is something that is harmful to U.S.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to my friend and colleague, the Vice Chairman of the House Committee. Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Thornberry.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, cost is a red herring argument here. Does it cost more to keep a detainee in Guantanamo than a federal prisoner here? Probably. But nothing like the figures that have been repeatedly cited on the other side. For example, if you look back at the fiscal year 11 Department of Justice budget request for moving the detainees to U.S. It ends up on the first year being about $1.9 million per detainee and about $500,000 per detainee in recurring costs. On the other side of it, even the President, in a speech at National Defense University, says that it's less than $1 million per prisoner now on detainee. Is there a difference? Sure. Is it anything like we've been hearing? No. And the rest of the story is, under the Geneva Convention, if you're holding somebody under the laws of war, you cannot put them with federal prisoners, even in a supermax prison. They have to be segregated. So those costs of bringing them here are higher. But that's not really the issue here. The issue is, what is the best thing to do to secure the country and to deal with the terrorist threat? And I just remind everybody, the ban on closing Guantanamo is not permanent. We have to reapprove it every year. So if the President actually comes up with a real plan, not just a speech, but a real plan to close Guantanamo and then deal with the detainees, then that ban can go away. But you can't say, okay, we're going to remove all the restrictions and we're going to close Guantanamo and then we're going to figure out what we do with these people. And that's exactly what this amendment does. The gentleman from Washington says it's just asked for a plan. Well, no, the underlying bill just asked for a plan. His amendment, in addition to ask for a plan, it removes all the existing restrictions, and on page 4, subsection D says specifically, no funds shall be used there to detain people after December 31st, 2014. We got to get the plan first before it closes, and I think this amendment should be rejected.
The gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California is recognized.
How much time do I have remaining?
Gentleman from California has 2 1/4 minutes remaining.
I yield myself the balance of time, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman is recognized.
I strongly oppose this amendment. 2.5 years ago, I sent the President a letter about these important issues. I said in that letter, and I quote, "I fully recognize the importance of crafting a careful and comprehensive framework for the detention of terrorists who wish to harm the United States. I also recognize the challenges and legal complexities related to such an endeavor. This appreciation is why this issue is simply too important for the administration to address on its own," end quote. The President did not take up my offer at that time. Nearly a year later, in another unanswered letter, I wrote, "While I remain open to working together, I'm very disappointed that the administration has frequently shown a greater willingness to engage with the international institutions, foreign governments, and the media on issues relating to our national security than it has with the U.S. House of Representatives." Those are excerpts from 2 of the 5 letters that I've written to the President on this issue, which he has not answered. Yet he still has not come forward with a proposal of oversight or any plan. What to do with Guantanamo is secondary to the President coming forward with a comprehensive plan. Such a plan must include what he proposes to do with those terrorist detainees who are too dangerous to release but cannot be tried. Number 2, how he will ensure terrorists transferred overseas do not return to the fight. 3, what he will do with the terrorists we capture in the future. Specifically, how will he prioritize intelligence questioning? And finally, what he will do with the high-value terrorists still held in Afghanistan. This is a particularly critical priority for me. There are several extremely dangerous individuals still in custody in Afghanistan. The only option that I see as completely unacceptable for those detainees is to allow their release. We've already seen the outcome of making this tragic mistake in Iraq. While I appreciate the proposed efficiency of my friend and colleague, Ranking Member Smith's amendment, we cannot strike all prohibitions on transfers of Gitmo detainees, agree to bring them to the United States, release them overseas, and end all funding for Gitmo with absolutely no confidence that any of this will be handled in a way that best protects our national security. Lastly, and this is important, I want to say that I'm proud of the men and women in uniform who serve our nation every day at Guantanamo. It's not an easy duty. We owe them a debt of gratitude for their critical service to this nation. I yield back.
Debate from earlier. Vote on that amendment by Adam Smith of Washington coming up shortly in the U.S. House.
On this vote, the yeas are 239, the nays are 182. The amendment is agreed to. The committee will come to order. The committee will come to order. The committee will come to order. Please take all conversations off the floor. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to speak out of order for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have my 7-year-old son with me.
The gentleman will suspend. The House will please come to order. Take all conversations off the floor if you need to continue them. Otherwise, the committee will come to order. The gentleman will continue.
Mr. Speaker, I have my 7-year-old son Jack with me this week, and we walked on the floor. He asked me, "Daddy, why is that trophy on that desk?" And I said, "Well, son, they won the game last night." So I rise in reluctant recognition of the fact that last night at National Stadium, the Democrats squeaked out a 22-0 victory over the stalwart Republican team. Our MVP is Senator Jeff Flake from Arizona, who was a member of this body until last year. And we had a number of other members who played very well. John Shimkus, Bill Johnson, Mike Conaway, Rodney Davis, Ron DeSantos, the list goes on and on. But the fact remains, the Democrats won, they're entitled to the trophy, and our hats are off to you. And with that, I yield to my good friend, the manager from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Mr. Mike Doyle.
Thank you. First, I want to thank my good friend Joe Barton, and he is my good friend, for a good game last night. I couldn't really single out individuals. This was a team effort on the Democratic side. Our team had 24 hits and no errors in the field. Cedric Richmond, who normally strikes out a lot of batters, last year Cedric had 16 strikeouts. For the first 5 innings, Cedric didn't strike out a single batter. We had 15 putouts in the field. When you hit the ball, we fielded it, we made the throws the first, and we made the plays. It was the best team effort that I've seen out of the Democratic side in the 19 years that I've been associated with the game, and I want to congratulate my team. But as my good friend Joe Barton knows, the real winners of this game are the 3 charities. We broke a record this year. We raised $300,000 for our charities. The Washington Boys and Girls Club, the Washington Literacy Council, and the Dream Foundation, which is going to help children in the 7th Ward in Washington, D.C. This is going to be a great program for the kids, for boys and girls to learn baseball, but also to learn the more important things in after-school learning centers and the like. So to the charities, the real winners of this game, congratulations. This is a great tradition that helps bring us together, and I can tell you the members of the Republican baseball team are friends of ours, and we enjoy the camaraderie and the game every year. We look forward to it again next year. I yield back. Thank you.
And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Yield back. Without objection, 2-minute voting will continue. The unfinished business is in the request for recorded vote on Amendment Number 22, printed in Part B of House Report 113-108 by the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Holt, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed in the voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 22, printed in Part B of House Report Number 113-108, offered by Mr. Holt of New Jersey.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. The sister number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. As a reminder from the chair, this is a 2-minute vote. 2-minute vote.
As you may have heard, Democrats won the 52nd annual congressional baseball game. As Congressman Doyle mentioned, they raised $300,000 for 3 D.C. area charities, the Washington Literacy Center, the Boys and Girls Club, and the Washington Nationals Dream Foundation. Back to votes. 14 amendment votes on the defense authorization bill. This is an amendment by Democrat Rush Holt of New Jersey, which would strike a number of provisions in the bill regarding areas of missile defense programs.
The nays are 362. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on Amendment Number 25, printed in Part B of House Report 113 and 108 by the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. McCollum, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes were to prevail by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 25, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-108, offered by Ms. McCollum of Minnesota.
A recorded vote having been requested, those in support of a recorded vote, please rise and be counted. Sufficient number having risen, recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. The chair reminds the floor this is a 2-minute vote.
The House gavelled in this morning at 9 a.m. Eastern for a third day of work on the 2014 Defense Authorization Bill. They are working their way through votes on 14 amendments. The final amendment votes on the bill. This is an amendment by Betty McCollum, Democrat of Minnesota, which would prohibit any funds in the bill from being used to sponsor Army National Guard professional wrestling sports sponsorships or motorsport sponsorships. It's a 2-minute vote.
Amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on Amendment Number 32, printed in Part B, House Report 113-108 by the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Nolan, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 32, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-108, offered by Mr. Nolan of Minnesota.
A recorded vote having been requested, those in support for request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, the recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
The proposed House Defense Authorization Bill is $638 billion, which includes $86 billion for the war in Afghanistan and other overseas operations. That's $52 billion above the sequestration budget cut levels. Rick Nolan, a Democrat of Minnesota, offering an amendment here and getting a vote now on an amendment which would reduce total funds in the bill by $60 billion, the amount the Special Commission on Wartime Contracting in Iraq and Afghanistan has identified as being lost in Iraq.
vote, the ayes are 71, the nays are 353. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on amendment number 33, printed in Part B of House Report 113-108 by the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Larson, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 33, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-108, offered by Mr. Larson of Washington.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
And another amendment vote here to the Defense Authorization Bill, an amendment which would reinstate $70 million to implement the New START Treaty.
On this vote, the yeas are 195, the nays are 229. The agreement is not agreed to. The unfinished business is on the request for recorded vote on Amendment Number 36, printed in Part B of House Report 113-108 by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Gibson, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 36, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-108, offered by Mr. Gibson of New York.
A recorded vote having been requested, those in support of a request for recorded vote will stand and be counted. Decision number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
The underlying bill authorizes defense spending for the next fiscal year. It also sets Pentagon programs and policy. This amendment, sponsored by Chris Gibson, a Republican